All right, regarding marriage licenses, oftentimes people will write letters and they ask questions and they call on the phone. And we have a letter here from a young lady, and she said, I spoke with your wife a week or so ago regarding marriage licenses. And my fiancé and I have been engaged since July of last year, and we're having trouble finding good, solid information in support of not getting a marriage license. Now, to add to this, my parents are strongly opposed to the idea, and they refuse to be any part of it or to pay for it without one, and mainly because they think that if we were to get a divorce or something were to happen to Nate, I would be left with nothing. Now, can you please help us by providing any resources, documentation, or evidence that proves not getting a marriage license is for the better of our family, and that we will be protected in the event of divorce or death? And also, can you please explain how we can get married without a marriage license? Are there any additional implications that we need to be aware of? Now, Nate is an avid listener and an admirer of your online radio talk show, and we very much appreciate your insight, opinion, and time. We would also like for you to know that we have attempted to research this very extensively, but we have not had much success, and therefore we are turning to you as a last resort. Please let us know if you have any questions, and thank you so much, and signed by Kim. Well, Kim, you're not the only person that writes and asks this question. So let me run through, and I'm going to answer your questions. So if you've got a copy of your email here, let's run through it again. And let me answer the questions for you one at a time, and then we'll take a look and we'll dissect this, and we'll do a legal analysis of this thing called a marriage license and a marriage and divorce. You start off and you say, I spoke with your wife a week or so ago regarding marriage licenses. My fiancé and I have been engaged since July of last year, and we're having trouble finding good, solid information in support of not getting a marriage license. Now, the reason that you're having a problem finding it, there isn't a book out there that says how to marry without a marriage license or families without marriage licenses. And when you went to college and you went to high school, there weren't any classes or there weren't any stories about marriage and marriage licenses. You get a one-sided story in the public education system. So let's ask this question. How many different ways can you get married? I mean, we all know about getting married with a marriage license, but how many different ways do people marry? And the answer is 3. 3. Do you know what those are? And did you learn that in college? Did you learn that in social studies? Did they teach you that in the 9th grade or 7th grade? They say, okay, now listen, boys and girls, someday you're going to get married. So here's the 3 ways that this can occur. Did your church teach you that? When you went to church, did the pastor stand up and say, now listen, let me explain the difference between biblical marriage and civil law marriage? Anybody ever say that? Now, it's not because there isn't any information out there isn't any knowledge. What were people doing before marriage licenses? Well, let me ask this. When did the first marriage license get issued? Was that at the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve? Did Abraham and Sarah have a marriage license? And if so, who issued it? Did King David get a marriage license when he married Bathsheba? I mean, come on, let's wake up and smell the coffee here. When did marriage licenses come into vogue in Australia, Canada, New Zealand, America, Florida, California? When did you people start doing that? And I thought marriage was a religious business. When did the church start issuing marriage licenses? Do they? Have they? Who thought up marriage license anyway? Well, you go on to say, to add to this, my parents are strongly opposed to the idea and refuse to have any part of it or pay for it without one. Well, listen, your parents went to public school too, didn't they? Now think about this for a minute. What do your parents know about marriage licenses? Do they know how many different types of marriages there are? When did marriage licenses come into vogue in your state? When did the marriage license first make its appearance? What about Abraham and Sarah having a marriage license, and who issued it? Come on. Your parents are the sum net total product of all of their experiences and education in life. When they went to school, did they go to Marriage License 101? I mean, I went to the public school system. Nobody taught me about marriage licenses. I went to church a couple, 3 times, and nobody said anything about marriage licenses to me. And I learned, just like probably you did, from my parents and from my church and from my peers around me, that a marriage license is necessary and imperative. Everybody gets one, and so why ask questions about it? It's just something you do. It's like a Social Security number. Everybody's got one, and it's the thing to do, and if you don't have one, you can't get a job. And so we all go down and get a marriage license, but nobody ever asks why. Nobody ever goes into the law book and says, well, is it a requirement? Many people, call here and say, well, a Social Security number is the law. You have to have a marriage, you have to have a Social Security number because there's a law. And so I was asking, well, what's the penalty for the violation of that law? And well, I don't know. Okay, where is that law that requires me to get one? I don't know. They're sure there is one. There's got to be one there somewhere because it's so universal. Everybody does it. So it's not surprising that your parents are opposed to marriage without a marriage license. It's the only thing they know. I had a guy here the other day. He wrote me a letter and he said, I'm not satisfied with the warranty deed. I'm not satisfied with the quitclaim deed that you gave me, and I want a warranty deed. And so I wrote him a letter back, and I said, sir, when I sold you this piece of property, in the contract for sale, on line 14, paragraph 2, it says specifically that upon completion of the payments, that I will issue to you a quit-claim deed. There's nothing in this contract that calls for a warranty deed. And so I'm not going to give you a warranty deed, sir. And I have already delivered to you the quitclaim deed. Why did this man want a warranty deed? Well, somebody told him that if he didn't have a warranty deed, he was SOL. He needed one. Now let me give you a little secret here. There's no such thing as a warranty deed. It doesn't exist. It's what we call in law a fiction of law. Now, warranty deeds are as common as pig tracks in a barnyard. Everybody has a warranty deed. Now go look up warranty deed in Corpus Juris Secundum, Corpus Juris, or American Jurisprudence, or a legal dictionary. And it doesn't exist. That's not to say that we don't have warranty deeds out there. Hell, they're selling them every day. So a question arises, well, how many different kinds of deeds are there? Does anybody know the answer to that? I do. The answer is 6. And warranty deed ain't one of them. So your parents then are the net sum product, the net sum total of all of their experiences and education in life. They don't know how many kinds of deeds there are, but they probably have a house, and they probably have a warranty deed issued by a title insurance company. It's the way everybody buys and sells property. Now, when we ask the question, should we have a warranty deed? I don't know if you should have a warranty deed or not. George Gordon shouldn't have one, and I don't. But whether or not you should have a warranty deed is a choice that you have to make in life. Now, I would suggest that people become educated as to all 6 deeds and then make a selection based upon your own personal druthers and your own experience in life and your own desires and aspirations in life. And maybe a warranty deed is for you. And if you want one, hell, you can get one. Go down to any title company and they'll sell you a warranty deed. Now, I'm not going to get off into deeds and tell you all about deeds now, because we want to talk about divorce and remarriage. But the point I want to make is that people do what other people around them do. Your mother and father probably have a Social Security number. I don't have one. I used to have one, and I looked it up and I researched it out, and I came to a conclusion one day. I said, this Social Security number is bad for me. It isn't good for me. It doesn't accomplish for me the things in life that I want to accomplish. And so I rescinded mine. I don't have one, and I'm 70 years old, and I don't draw Social Security benefits. And that's just peculiar. And when I tell people that, they look at me like I'm work from work, and they say, what the hell's the matter with you? You must be a lunatic. Didn't you pay money into Social Security? I did. And did you get your money back? I didn't. Well, don't you want to get your money back? I'd love to. Well, why don't you go down and sign up for it? Because there's strings attached to it that I don't want the liabilities for. Well, what liabilities are there? Well, that's another long story. And we'll talk about Social Security and the strings and liabilities attached to Social Security at some future date. Like we'll talk about warranty deeds and quitclaim deeds and fiancement deeds and statutory deeds. And, we can talk about different legal subjects, and should you do this or not. So let's start off with this. It says, you want me to give you a legal reason why you should not have a marriage license, or can I show you, from my experience and my education, why it is that you should follow George Gordon? And the answer is no. I haven't got a clue. I don't know what's good for you, Kim. I don't know what's good for Nate. I don't know what's good for your parents. Now, my mother and father had a marriage license. Yeah, they got divorced. I don't know that the marriage license caused the divorce, and I'm not making that allegation. I'm just pointing out that the marriage license didn't prevent divorce, did it? Now, divorce happens in life, and we'll talk about divorce as we progress along here, because divorce is a part and parcel with marriage, and it's a part and parcel with the marriage license. And there's an outcome that comes from these actions that we make. When you get a warranty deed, there's an outcome. You get a quitclaim deed, there's an outcome. Get a fiancement deed, grant deed, there's an outcome that comes from it. If the outcome that comes from a grant deed is the outcome that you want in life, that's the deed you want. Not because it's the only deed you know about or somebody sold you that deed. It's the deed that you need to seek out, and the deed you need to find, the deed you need to record, the deed you need to use, because that provides you with the outcome that you're looking for in life. Now, a civil law marriage is a modality of marriage that has evolved over time, and it fills a need. There are people out there that need a civil law marriage and a marriage license. And George Gordon is not one of those. I don't know if Kim and Nate are one of those. I don't know if your mother and father is one of those. So it's not my role in life to persuade you that I'm right and you ought not to have a marriage license. My role in life is to show you that there are alternatives out there, and that there are strings attached, and there are consequences that come from your actions, and that you should be informed of, and you should be aware of the outcome that is going to occur when you get a marriage license. And if that's the outcome that you want, that's the program for you. Now, if for some reason that isn't the outcome that you want, and the strings that are attached to the marriage license and the liabilities that attach to it are things that you don't want, then you ought to avoid a marriage license like AIDS, herpes, and VD. I think that that's just reason, logic, and common sense. All right? So don't get mad at your parents now and say, well, they're opposed to this. It's probably the only thing they know. Maybe they're very familiar with the three forms of marriage, and maybe they've come to the conclusion that the civil law marriage is the best form of marriage, and that they want to sell that to you. And they're fully informed, or it may be that they're woefully ill-informed, uninformed, don't have a clue as to anything other than, and therefore they're shooting in the dark. I don't know. I don't know your parents. I don't know what their educational level is. Going on, you say, can you please help us providing any resources, documentation, or evidence that proves that not getting a marriage license is for the better of our family? and that we will be protected in the event of a divorce or death? And the answer to that is yes, I can. Yes, and I'm going to do that. I have two schools. In my first school that I recommend to students that are beginning, it's tax and status. In chapters 43 and 44, we have, I'm just going to look here. I've got a little pile of paper here, and I'm going to say that there's 50 pages here in these two chapters. 58.5 by 11 pages. And they represent 32 reasons why I don't have a marriage license. 32 reasons. So you ask me, are there any? The answer is yes. How many? 32. And then there's a second story. It's a whole school with, I forgot now, I put this on the air the other day. I think there's 50 lessons or more, 58 lessons in my family court school, in which we not only dissect the marriage license, we get into the nitty-gritty of things like divorce, custody orders, child support. Listen to some of these right here. We talk about alimony, child support, custody, dissolution, divorce, protective custody, restraining orders. We have chapters in there. We go through step by step, so that people that are divorced and are trying to get custody of their children, or they've had their children taken and they're in foster care or something like that, and we go through that in detail. This is the way the game is played. This is the way the law reads. This is the way you research it out. So we have one whole school that's just devoted to this whole subject of marriage and divorce and custody and alimony and child support and family court and the whole ball of wax. Okay? And then I asked the question, what did people do before marriage licenses? What were people doing when they didn't have marriage licenses? What do people do in countries that don't have marriage licenses? How do those people live? Maybe they don't live as well. Maybe there's all kinds of problems and hang-ups that the marriage license solves, and maybe that's the best solution, and we ought to look into that and find out. Maybe that's true. But it always reminds me when wintertime comes, when you're watching the CBS Evening News, or Brian Williams in the news, and they'll have a story in there about the price of heating oil in New England. People up in New England, they heat with heating oil. See? And when these cold snaps come in, and they'll bring the cameras up and they'll show a heating oil truck, and the guy's pulling the hose and sticking the nozzle in, and the price is $4 a gallon, and they'll interview some guy. I just don't know what I'm going to do with this heating oil at $4 a gallon. I don't know if I'm going to eat or not. I might have to eat Alpo dog food. And it makes a story, see? And the rest of us around the country, we cry and we lament and we say, oh, those poor people up in Boston. Why doesn't the government do something like go up there and buy heating oil for the people in Boston? Let me ask this question. How long has Boston, Massachusetts been there? Hell, it was there when Paul Revere was riding around the countryside telling people the redcoats was coming, wasn't it? So there was life in Boston, Massachusetts before heating oil, wasn't there? I mean, come on, kids, let's wake up and smell the coffee here. Heating oil is something that comes from petroleum. And the first oil well drilled in America was Drake's oil well in Pennsylvania in 1859. The year before the Civil War broke out, remember? Or two. Was there life in Boston before 1859 when Drake discovered oil? And the answer to that is yes. Yes, there were people living in Boston, Massachusetts in 1840, in 1800, 1776. Now, let's put the ringer in here. How in the hell did those people heat their homes before heating oil? And then why don't we go back to doing it the same way they did before heating oil and tell the Arabs to stick their oil up their hind ends? Huh? No, I'm not opposed to heating oil. It's a hell of a neat way to heat your house. And if the price is $14 a gallon and you can't afford heating oil, maybe you got to heat your house some other way. Have you ever thought about that? Now, I'll tell you this, not everybody in Boston, Massachusetts heats their house with heating oil. There's got to be one guy somewhere in Boston that heats his house and doesn't have heating oil. And I would submit to you, if there's one guy that can do that, then 2 could do it, and then 4, and then 8, and then 16, and, you know. Now, I don't use heating oil to heat my house. And the prevailing theory behind heat in this country here where I'm at is propane. And most people heat with propane, but not all of us do. I heat with wood. And I'm very happy with my wood. And I get an outcome from that. Saves me about $2 a gallon for propane. Now, you see where we're going here, Kim? There are solutions because there are alternatives. There's people that have been doing this for a long time. And so if we could find out, well, what were people doing in 1776 before marriage licenses? Now, a lot of times people will say to me, well, if you don't have a marriage license, you don't have a marriage, and the children that are born from a marriage without a marriage license are illegitimate. What's the argument behind that? What's the legal basis for illegitimacy? Well, there's a thing called a bastard, and there's a thing called an illegitimate. A bastard is commonly referred to as being illegitimate, but if you look up the legal terms, a bastard is somebody that is born and is of racial mixture. The President of the United States of America, Barack Obama, is a bastard. That's not a derogatory term, that's a legal term. He's born from a white mother and a black father, had a miscegenated marriage. The outcome of that are called mulattoes. Those mulattoes in law are called bastards. Now, that doesn't make Barack Obama illegitimate. He could inherit from his father and his mother. Now, illegitimate means you cannot inherit. It doesn't have anything to do with your racial mixture. Now, oftentimes people go to school, they get out of school, they go to college, they get out of college, and they go out and they make their livings in life, and they live their lives, and they die, and they're buried in a hole in the ground, never know the difference between a bastard and an illegitimate. Well, now you know. I just told you. If you don't believe me, go look it up. Hell, you can spell illegitimate, can't you? You can spell bastard, can't you? I'm not telling you something here, you know, telling you tales out of school. But here's the point I'm making. People are willingly ignorant. They are dumb on purpose because they're lazy. They don't want to find out. They don't want to go look that up. It takes too much time, effort, and energy to do that. Now, I'm not accusing you of being lazy because you could not find this information. Can you please explain how we can get married without a license, marriage license? And are there any additional implications that we should be aware of? The answer is yes and yes. I can explain to you how you can get married without a marriage license. Now, when you ask me that question, I don't know how old you are, Kim. You sound like, you know, you're 23 years old or something like that. Probably been to college. Can I tell you how you can get married without a marriage license? And I presume that you don't know how to do that. It reminds me of the story of Columbus when he came back from the New World. They had a big banquet. And at the banquet, they were serving boiled eggs in the shell in bowls on the tables. And somebody got loud and raucous, you know, as the party was getting going good. They're drinking a lot of wine and having a good time. And so some guy got kind of boisterous and loudmouth, and he says, this sailing west, discovering the New World over here is no big deal. Anybody could have done it. And he wasn't whistling Dixie there. You know, there were lots of sailors in the world when Columbus set sail, and those people were sailing around the Cape Horn, and they were sailing through the Indian Ocean, and they were sailing around all over the world. They didn't want to get too far away from land, of course, but they were sailors, and they could run boats, and they knew. And so his point was anybody could have pointed a boat west and sailed west until they found land. Now, Columbus was the first guy to do this, the first European, you know, and up to that time, at least they thought so at that point in time. And so Columbus, he was feeling kind of poor about that. So he said, well, listen, if you think that sailing west and discovering the New World was so easy, let me ask you this. Can you stand an egg on its small end? And so the party's really warming up now, see? And so people are out here trying to stand this egg on the small end. Now, you can test this yourself. Take a boiled egg now, not a fresh egg, a boiled egg, and try to stand it on the small end. And then while you're at it, try to stand it on the large end. I mean, you just try to stand it on its end. Now, it'll lay on its side fairly easy. Even I can do that. But standing it on the small end requires some skill and ability, requires some knowledge. And so everybody around the banquet hall now, everybody's reaching for an egg, everybody's trying to balance an egg on the small end, and predictably nobody can do it. Nobody knows how to stand an egg on the small end. And so pretty soon the loudmouth over here says, well, Columbus, if you're so damn smart, why don't you show us how to stand an egg on the small end? And Columbus stood up in front of everybody and said, okay, now I'll be happy to do that. So he took an egg, and he held it in his hand over the table, and he dropped it and smashed the small end flat. Test it. Take a boiled egg and hit it on the table. Bang, on the table. And it'll smash the small end flat. And then take your hand off of it, and it'll stand right up there on the small end. Now, of course, the guy complained and said, but you broke the eggshell. And Columbus said, I didn't say anything about breaking the eggshell. I asked you if you could stand an egg on the small end. And you couldn't do it. But now I would submit that any of you people in here can stand an egg on the small end now that I've showed you how. Well, Kim, as soon as I show you how, you too will be able to marry without a marriage license. I understand that right now you don't know how. Nobody's ever showed you. But I can show you. I'm married. I don't have a marriage license. I know how to do it. So, yes, the right guy. Asking your parents probably won't help you very much because they probably don't know. But that doesn't mean that they're dumb and that they can't learn. And I can teach them, I can teach you. But it still doesn't go to the question of, well, should I or should I not get a marriage license? See, we haven't got to that point yet. And I'm not here to convince or to persuade you that you should or should not get a marriage license. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what the marriage license is, and we'll take a look at it. And we'll take a look at common law marriage and patriarchal marriage. We'll take a look at it from the perspective of God and the Scripture, and take a look at it from the point of view of history and the legal implications that go with it. And then I'll just leave it up to you and say, well, now, why don't you choose? There's 3 forms of marriage. There's 6 forms of deeds. Choose one. And there are 3 forms of marriage. And when you get through here, you can choose whichever one that you and Nate decide that's good for you. How's that for a plan?